Is it brain fog or is it actually low testosterone? I'm Mandy. I'm a registered clinical nutritionist with the Body Reset program, and today we're going to talk about testosterone in women. There is no reason why men should be getting all the fun with this hormone, especially because we make it just as they do. Testosterone is always touted as this male hormone, and yet we actually make, as women, 3 times more testosterone than we make estrogen. And we have receptors for this throughout our entire body. This means when testosterone levels change, which they do for us, just the same as they do for men as we age, we can feel the effects in many different ways. In fact, because we have receptors for it everywhere, we feel these effects as the word is systemic. We can feel them throughout our body in all sorts of different systems. For example, our cardiovascular system have an impact from low testosterone levels. Our bone mass and our muscle mass takes a hit from low testosterone levels. Our mood and our sleep can be impacted by low testosterone levels. And what I really want to focus on here today is your brain function, mental clarity, cognition, mood, all of those things that we need to function really, really well and feel amazing at the different things we're doing can take a bit of a hit if testosterone is dropping and perhaps we're not being tested for it, or perhaps we're not doing the things that really optimize its levels. And this is what I see. Because testosterone is, kind of lumped into that male hormone category, and for women it's often just left off the table altogether, there's a couple of gaps in the system. One is that often women are a little bit worried about testosterone. We've heard the term high androgens, and we know that there's a link with, too high testosterone and perhaps acne issues, or for women with PCOS, there can be an androgen-driven form of that. So there absolutely is a factor there. We don't want too much of it either because that's not great. But more often than not, when I actually get, testosterone levels tested for the woman that I work with, I'm actually seeing low levels overall. The other part of it is that the blood test levels are not really there's not an agreed on level of this is how much someone needs and this is how much someone doesn't need, for example. They're very individual and variable. So where you sit in that scale might not be in the quote unquote reference range. It might be you need a little bit more, or it might be someone needs a little bit less. So the testing can be useful, but it's useful as a guide to correlate with other symptoms of what is going on. More often than not as well, I think that what I see is people who are a little bit concerned about high androgens often don't actually have any of the signs and symptoms of high androgen. So these could be things like acne, for example, can sometimes be that, but it can be other things as well. Hair growth, like facial hair growth and body hair growth, etc., can be a real common high androgen sign, or maybe hair loss can be another high androgen sign. And more often than not, women don't necessarily have these signs, but they think that they have high androgens. And so I think it's a really important one for us just to unpack a little bit more, and also understand that if you are perimenopausal and beyond, your testosterone levels will have been declining like they do for everyone over time, and it's more likely that you're actually on the low side than you are on the high side. And while I don't necessarily recommend going straight into hormone replacement therapy or testosterone replacement therapy, there is a lot of things we can do to naturally support testosterone levels, which we're going to go through today. So before I get into that, testosterone replacement therapy, this is actually an option that is becoming more available in Australia. There are some approved female TRT options. In New Zealand, we typically use a smaller dose of the male approved version. It needs to be obviously prescribed through your healthcare practitioner in conversation with them, and it's not often prescribed. It can be, but I don't see a whole lot of it. Though for the women that I have seen try it out, they tend to get a fairly positive effect from it. However, I would exercise caution there and say it is worthwhile making sure you have all the foundations in place first. Now, the things I'm going to talk through here, we dive into a whole lot through our menopause reset. This is a fully guided 28-day program that you can go through. If you haven't seen that and you are struggling with hormonal symptoms, maybe you don't know what's driving them, you just know that you're feeling like there's things changing, this would be a really, really great place to start. So I'm actually going to link it down below for you, because if this is kind of landing for you and you want to dive deeper, that would be a brilliant place to start. But the key foundations when it comes to supporting your body's natural ability to make testosterone, one, your adrenals, and we're going to spend a little bit of time with that one because it's a really interesting concept and really, really relevant for women, men as well actually, but particularly for women. We're going to look at building blocks. So this is your things like your proteins and your minerals and whatnot to actually make the hormone. And then we're also going to talk about training, because there's a big change that needs to happen there if you've come from a really high cardio background or perhaps haven't trained much at all. There's some real shifts that can be built in there, which one you're going to enjoy and they're going to actually just help you to feel great, but they can have a really positive effect on testosterone as well. So the adrenals, your body makes testosterone from your ovaries, from your adrenals, and you actually make some in your brain as well, which is super cool. Your brain needs testosterone to function well and for that mental clarity and cognition, which it's really, really known for. Your ovaries tend to reduce their production of testosterone as we age, much the same way that it does with estrogen and progesterone. And so the adrenal glands are left there to kind of take up the slack. The demand for them to make testosterone increases a little bit as the ovaries production declines. Now, the adrenal glands are also responsible for managing our nervous system response. And so this tends to get priority because it's about survival, it's about urgency, where hormones, which kind of come into the sex hormone category, they're less about survival and more about that thriving kind of component. So they're the nice to have rather than the need to have. So if we are constantly in a state of hyper revved up stress response, if we're in that state where our stress response is always being pinged, we're always in that sympathetic nervous system response, always in the fight flight response, our adrenal glands are prioritizing making our stress hormones, our cortisol and our adrenaline and all of those sorts of things. And they're not prioritizing making the DHEA and the testosterone and whatnot that they could be making to help us feel really great. And so when it comes to actually supporting testosterone levels, the first thing we need to be looking at is how are our adrenals going? What are we doing to actually look after our nervous system response and our adrenal glands? A couple of things we need to look at here. And I think it's really important because often through the time of life when we need our adrenals to be taking up that slack and making the testosterone, it's also the time of life when people are chronically stressed and maybe have been living with this quite significant stress load for some time. Maybe teenage children, crucial time in career, all sorts of things is going on at this time of life. There's that you're still looking after your children, there's maybe aging parents in the picture, there's a whole lot of dynamics and you're juggling all the balls. And so there's this like stress load, but it's very normalized. We are used to it. We carry the load, we just pick it up each day and we keep going. And so we might not even necessarily say, oh yeah, I'm stressed, because we're actually used to the load. It doesn't mean that our adrenals aren't doing a lot of work internally to be able to keep up with that. And so what I like to do for people is I like to look at, let's make sure we're supplying the key building blocks that your adrenals need to function really, really well. These are magnesium. When you are in a higher stress state, and everyone is, you need a lot of magnesium. There's not a single adult that I would recommend doesn't take some form of magnesium unless you were allergic to it or something like really weird like that. Magnesium's essential. We don't get enough from the food we eat. We drop it and burn through it when we're in a stressed state, and we should be supplementing it, in my opinion. So a really good dose of magnesium is good for your adrenals. Your adrenals love two other key nutrients. One is sodium and one is vitamin C. Vitamin C you'll typically get enough from if you are eating a lot of vegetables and berries and those sorts of things, but it wouldn't hurt to put a little bit extra in either. You can't really overdose on it. Well, you can, but it's at very, very high levels. And then sodium's another really important one. Often we're kind of focused on restricting salt because of the blood pressure impact and all those sorts of things, but your body needs sodium to function well. Your body needs sodium to produce energy. Your adrenals need sodium to be able to maintain their function. So salt your food well. If you tend towards having low blood pressure or anything like that, using a good electrolyte can also be really supportive for your adrenal glands. So there's magnesium, there's sodium, there's vitamin C, and then we're also looking at lifestyle design and all those other aspects. And you don't need to be a monk on a mountaintop. You don't need to be going for girls' weekends and pamper days and all those sorts of things either. Stress management and lifestyle design is about the little things that you do on a regular basis. It's about the little routines that you hold on to that are important for yourself. Getting to bed at a reasonable time, stopping and taking a few breaths before you eat your meals, going for a 10-minute walk before you sit down to work for the day. Those little things, they seem irrelevant at the time, but they're the little points in time when your adrenals can take a little rest. They're the point in time when your adrenals get a wee break and you can kind of come back into yourself a little bit. And they all add up over time to allow your adrenals that time to go and do the other things like making testosterone, which is what we're here to talk about. So no amount of stress herbs or anything like that, the ashwagandha and all those sorts of things, they're great add-ons. They're cherries on the cake. They don't solve the problem if we're not solving the root issue, which is constantly running all the time, constantly putting pressure on ourselves and never actually stopping to take a break. So the big thing that I really want you to take away from here is if you're feeling that kind of brain fog, mental kind of inability to just be clear with your thoughts or cognition issues or anything like that, and you wonder if it's hormone related, it's potentially to do with low testosterone, and the support comes from supporting the adrenals, which are going to pick up the slack and actually make that testosterone for you. So that's the first part. Next part for supporting testosterone production is about building blocks. First one is protein. You need protein to help this production of testosterone. You also need fats, and in particular you need cholesterol. Now, testosterone literally is made from cholesterol. Too low cholesterol, not necessarily good for our testosterone levels. We tend to be focused on the negative of cholesterol rather than focusing on what it's really good for, and also on the negative of fats rather than the positive benefits of fats. So good protein intake, good healthy fat intake is really, really important for testosterone production. And then the key nutrients for testosterone levels are zinc being one, really, really crucial. Also a nutrient which I see is often low in people's blood work. It's not a nutrient that is rich in a lot of the foods that we eat, and it's a nutrient used in many different processes in the body, so it's very easy to get deficient in it. Vitamin D is another one. Even though we live in New Zealand and Australia, get good sunshine hours and all of those things, more often than not people are somewhat vitamin D deficient, particularly adults, and it's not often tested, but there is a strong correlation with low vitamin D levels and low testosterone levels. So this is one that I would recommend you get tested if you haven't been tested for it, and supplement with it if you are low. Getting a little bit of sunshine hours does not, correct a major deficiency particularly quickly, and it could be the thing that's really impacting your ability to produce good levels of testosterone. So we've got the zinc, the vitamin D, magnesium is also important for testosterone production, and then there is another mineral which we will sort of touch on, but I would suggest working with a specialist on this one, which is boron. Boron has an impact on testosterone production, but also on your ability to utilize magnesium well, and it is also important for changing levels of your sex hormone binding globulin. Now, I haven't really talked about sex hormone binding globulin. I don't want to get too stuck in the weeds here, but if you're going to go and get a testosterone test done, what we need to look for is we need to look for a total testosterone, a free testosterone, and a sex hormone binding globulin. They're usually done as a kind of a test panel where they're all done together. And the reason for this is that your total testosterone is a measure of all the testosterone in your body, but not all of it is available to you. Some of it is bound to a protein called sex hormone binding globulin. Now, what's really interesting here for women is that sex hormone binding globulin tends to increase in people who have been on the oral contraceptive pill, and a lot of us have. The oral contraceptive pill increases sex hormone binding globulin, which means it attaches to more of your testosterone. So even if you have good levels of it, you may not have levels that are available. So that's where the free testosterone test is really important, to see how much sex hormone binding globulin is there and how much free testosterone is actually available to be used throughout the body. Now, where boron comes in is that boron can help to reduce sex hormone binding globulin, and there's not many things that actually reduce that. So it's quite a useful tool in the tool belt there. Because it does have a dynamic effect on testosterone levels, I do recommend exercising caution and working with a specialist if you're looking at supplementing with that one, because for people who have a history of high androgens like PCOS or those sorts of things, there can be issues with putting too much boron in there. So we've talked through the building blocks. The last one is the movement or exercise piece, and I kind of would call this moving with intent. We're not just moving to burn calories at this point in time. We're moving with the intent of actually supporting our testosterone levels, actually supporting our brain, our muscles, our bone, and our energy levels throughout the day. And this is where there needs to be a bit of a shift. So cardio exercise does have a positive benefit on testosterone production, but it's not quite the same as strength training. And for a lot of women, we've either come from a history of not really being particularly active or tending towards more cardio-based exercises. Through perimenopause and into menopause, it's really important that we make this transition into some form of resistance training being built into our week. Couple of reasons for this. Testosterone helps build muscle, but muscle also helps build testosterone. It's a two-way street. All right, it goes round and round. So typically when we think about, testosterone, and especially in kind of like the bodybuilding space, we know that it helps with that muscle mass ability, but also contracting muscles is a powerful stimulant for more testosterone production because it helps with recovery and it helps with that muscle building process. So you're not going to get jacked, you're not going to get bulky, you're just going to feel really awesome. And it's something that can be slowly built in over time. You don't have to go from never having walked in a gym to suddenly doing 4 hours, 4 times a week or anything like that. Slow and steady, just building up over time and actually building in a habit of contracting muscles and doing some resistance training. These are the foundational pieces which, before anyone goes towards TRT or anything like that, I'd be saying make sure we're looking at the adrenal piece, providing the nutrients your adrenals need and making sure you're designing a lifestyle that really supports your adrenal health. Looking at those key building blocks: protein, cholesterol, fats, zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, maybe some boron, and then looking at your exercise and movement patterns. Are you moving? Are you running too much and not actually building muscle mass? What is your exercise and daily activities actually telling your body to do when it comes to the production of hormones? So really, really important one, really important for us to understand, I think, because low testosterone has such a broad impact, and that impacts that could easily be mistaken for other things, and very, very often I think they are. The things like that low mood, low vitality, feeling blah is a word that I've heard really commonly for women who have low testosterone. Loss of interest in things that used to be fun for them, and particularly that brain fog, that lack of mental clarity, those things which we associate with perhaps just being too tired or, just being menopausal, etc. It's not a good enough excuse, right? We need more than that, and there's something we can do about it, and we don't have to live feeling horrible all the time. So hopefully this was useful. Check out that menopause reset below, because that is going to be a deeper dive into all of these things and the next best steps for you to go from here if you're struggling with your hormones. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.